All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another edition of Happy Hour with CarnaticON. Today, we're joined by one of our instructors who we are super excited to have. This is Flute Jayanth. Hi, Jayanth.
Hi, Yamini, and hi to everyone that's viewing this interview.
We are so excited to have you. For those of you who have not heard of Jayant, which is a little bit impossible, he's actually started learning flute at a very, very young age. I'll let him tell you a little bit more about his gurus. But what I found really fascinating was that he actually gave his first solo concert, that is his maiden solo concert, when he was 7 years old. Now, I'm constantly reminded of what I was doing at all these ages by all of these fantastic artists we have on board, and I don't even remember what I was doing at 7. So, at 7, to be able to give his own maiden solo concert, he's performed over 1,600 solo concerts, not only in India but all around the world. He has been invited to perform at like many sabhas, like the Madras Music Academy, the Swati Sangeetotsavam, Cleveland. He's performed in Cleveland, in Delhi, in Bangalore, like everywhere, all around the world. Okay, so we're really excited to have you on board today, Jayant. Welcome to
My pleasure.
CarnaticON. Welcome to this happy hour, and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for the nice introduction. Um, I started learning to play the flute when I was 5 from my grandfather, late T.S.Sankaran. He was a prominent flautist. Um, so initially, it started in a way wherein I used to observe he teaching his students, and then I used to observe and then try to replicate the same the notes phrases try, and then I would ask him how to get this note right, and things like that. And later it so happened that I had to kind of you know prove it to him that I was not just an observer, and but also a very kind of very passionate about the flute, which I was ever since I was a kid, ever since I was a toddler. So I had to kind of learn certain compositions myself and then play it for him. And that's when he probably understood that, okay, this kid is quite serious about what he's asking for. So that's when he started teaching me properly. And then I was 7 when I played my first concert. It was at one of the most famous venues here in Mylapore in Chennai. It's called Srinivasa Shastri Hall. So I was 7 years old, and it was a blessing to have Sangeeta Kalanidhi Velu Ramabhadran sir. He was a legendary Mridangam player. So he was on the Mridangam that day. He played for me on the Mridangam. So that is how it began. And I also learned vocal music from my grandmother. So the basic foundation is vocal music. In Indian classical music, it's important that you learn to sing first, and then you digress to you know any instrument that you want to learn, or even percussion for that matter. um, so I learned vocal music from my grandmother first, and then but it was not planned, saying my parents never had an intention or had a proper scheduling done, in the sense he learns vocal first and then goes to flute. So I
Yeah.
think all of it happened very naturally and organically, and there was no pressure from my parents and for me to learn the flute. So it was all out of my own will. In fact, I used to make sure that my grandfather teaches me all that I wanted to learn, because he was under the assumption that I shouldn't take music up so seriously that I let go of my education. So I had to ensure at times that he teaches me with as much sincerity and dedication as he would teach his students. So that is how it began, and it's been quite an eventful journey so far.
Yeah, for sure. You've had definitely had a very so far like a very very I mean, a very established journey also. You've done so many things, and just reading your bio, I was like, wow, so excited to interview you. So, when you were talking about this, your grandfather, and you were so small and you were learning, what it reminded me of was the whole, I don't know if you've watched Bandish Bandits. It's like this show that's come up on Amazon, I think.
I know. I watched a couple of episodes, but I'm very bad when it comes to binge watching TV series. So
I'm very good
I
at that.
think I should, yeah, I think I should just make time for that.
Yeah, so I mean, like, after a very long time, I think it was one show that had focused so much on music. So when you were talking about that, it just reminded me of that, because in that as well, the lead is basically taught by his grandfather, and he held him to like really high standards, and they were from like a musical family. So it just kind of reminded me of that. And like it was, you said your parents, obviously, luckily for you, they didn't like force you or pressurize you into learning this. But what do you think, like, was listening to your grandfather the motivation for you to start like picking up the flute, or like what motivated you at such a young age when most people are not aware of what they're doing, but you were like passionate enough to go and ask him to teach me more and like teach me properly, because like my parents put me in music class. I was like 2 days kapra, I was like enala mudiyada, and I just came back. But like to have
Right.
that passion and dedication at that age, what do you think motivated you at that age?
So I would probably go slightly ahead of that. So or slightly before that. So even before I started learning the flute or got to hear the sound, apparently my parents tell me I used to go to bed only after listening to my grandfather's concert. And there are photographs wherein I'm as a 1 year old, as a 2 year old, I'm having flutes in both. So from my memory, so my earliest obsession, well, it were the flutes. So uh, I would have my toys around, I would also have the flutes around with me. And I could easily distinguish between the good flutes from the bad.
Wow.
So um, I used to ask for my grandfather's flute that he used to use, for his concerts, because I probably had a sense that that sounded better than what he used to get from me. Uh, um, so I could distinguish between the good ones and the bad ones, which I do even now. So when my flute maker brings me flutes, so he would bring about 25, 30 of them, but just by the sight of it, I know which one is good. So I think that's a gift. Uh, so probably the fact that I was exposed to music early on, as a 1 year old, 2 year old, I did have a keen interest on playing the flute the way it sounds. It probably is because my grandfather used to play it and I was very, very close to him. He was the closest to me, rather. So I can't really, like separate one from the other, whether it was the flute that uh, made me so close to my grandfather, was it my association with my grandfather that brought me to playing the flute. I think it's both, so they're inseparable, right? I think it is that, and also the way in which my grandfather used to play the flute that kind of influenced me. His body language, the sound, the tone, the pitch perfection, all that matters. So I think it predominantly has to do with my grandfather's influence on me at a very early age. Um, Also, I believe that certain things happen with a reason, right? So it's not that just happens. Like everything happens for a reason. So um, it is a kind of a blessing that I was born into this family. I was born to him, to my parents as his grandson. So I think it's a lot of things, and it's my responsibility to play the flute really well and take it to the next level.
Yeah, no, and you're a prodigy for sure. Like at that age, if you're able to do all of
Yeah,
this,
no, but after listening to people like Mandel and Srinivas, so one only gets to understand that. Okay, talking of prodigies, I think it's Mandel and Srinivas who probably was the
that's
last of prodigies.
no, that's incredible. I also saw. So I don't really know much about the flute, but then I did see something about you like knowing how to play the thick-walled bamboo flute. Can you like explain to us what's the difference between these different flutes, and how hard or easy are to play?
Oh yeah, sure. So so this is one of my flutes, primary flutes that I play in my concerts, and this is the bass flute.
Uh huh. Oh,
So
wow.
bass flute meaning the longer it gets,
Mm-hmm.
um, the lower the octave it produces. And this is a double bass flute that I have introduced in Carnatic music. So
Yeah.
basically, flutes are of different sizes. And when I say thick walled flutes, it's very important that you maintain the frequency of the music that
Mm-hmm.
you present. Every music has a certain frequency.
Mm-hmm.
Every music has a certain way in which it has to sound. So for Carnatic, these are thick walled flutes. When I say thick walled, you can see the thickness of
Yeah.
the flute and also the diameter. It's quite big. It looks
Mm-hmm.
very thick. So what happens? It produces a certain tone, um, which is solid, which is what we call rounded, which is sweet, which is pleasant to the ears, and it's clean sound, wherein there is no puffiness involved, or there is no airy sound that comes out of the flute, because the sounding has to be clear,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? That's the proper technique. You can't sound airy just because this is a wind instrument. You can, of course, bring in those elements.
Yeah.
So So this was just one phrase from a raga, Shankarabharanam. So these are the thick walled flutes, and it produces tone like these. So I don't really need a microphone for the sound to be amplified.
Yeah.
So with
Yeah.
a good blowing technique and with a thick walled flute, of course, it's important you make it custom made the way you want it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So these are thick walled bamboo flutes, and it's very, very difficult to play them because you need to have real good lung capacity
Yeah.
and blowing power to be able to actually produce sound out of it. There are flutes of different sizes and different thickness, in the sense there are flutes that are thin, there are flutes that are longer, in terms of size, and some of the holes on the flutes are of different sizes too. They can be tinier, they can be bigger. So I think it's to do with the awareness that you create for yourself,
Yeah.
so that you kind of play the kind of flutes that help you produce the best possible music that you can out of the flutes, because flute is a certain instrument which cannot be made for like 10 flautists across the platform. So it's important that each one gets flute made the way they want,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
depending upon their lung capacity, depending upon the sizes of the fingers, depending upon, I go to the extent of saying, their lip sizes, because that's where you hold the flute.
Right.
So there are a lot of aspects that come into play. So yeah, so I basically have crafted my own flutes with the help of my flute maker, and
Right.
I also play these bass flutes. So the longer the flute, the lower the octave it produces.
Right. Right.
So you just overcome the drawback of a flute having, uh, you know, a range of 1.5 octaves
Yeah.
on both ends, the upper and the lower end. So by playing flutes of different sizes, you basically tend to bridge the gap and present your music in multiple octaves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Awesome.
then there is the double bass flute. I'm not sure if Zoom is going to pick the frequencies up, but just for a sample. So this is a double bass flute. So it spans 3 octaves lower
Wow.
uh, of than the primary flute that I use. So these are the different kinds of flutes that I play, and they vary in sizes
Mm-hmm.
and the diameter, and also the kind of bamboos that I use are also different from flute to flute.
Nice, nice. So does it, how long did it take you to kind of finalize that this was going to be, the style of flute that you will play? And generally, how long does it take, or what's the process it takes a flautist to realize that this is the kind of flute that they want to, play with?
Oh, I think it's an endless process. I mean, so long as you play the flute at a professional level, uh, um, as a mainstream flautist, so long as you perform like
Mm-hmm.
regularly, I think it's a lifelong process. With age, you probably end up changing your flutes. With
Yeah.
age, you understand that your body undergoes a certain change, so it would obviously have an impact on the music that you produce. Basically, to do with your abilities and disabilities in doing you probably what you were doing. So it's an endless evolution. So I think a musician should kind of implement those changes, those discoveries, and uh, be sophisticated enough to make those changes from time to time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In my case, since I started playing quite early, and something that really helped me was my grandfather never imparted his ideas upon me, saying, these are the kind of flutes you should play, and this is what you should do. This is the way in which you're supposed to play the flute. So he just created the path and said, these are the certain idioms within which you need to work around.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that really helped me to kind of experiment. And I think that's an endless process. I wouldn't say that, these are the flutes that I'm going to play for the next 30, 40 years. I probably would end up making certain changes in the next 2, 3 years as well. So
Yeah.
I think it's a journey, and I'm just happy being a part of this.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Um, I also heard about like you being able to play the RTP in like three speeds, and you were able to do that when you were like really small.
I mean, yeah, Ragam Tanapalvi. So that's something that everyone does in their concerts. But I was 7, and in the very first concert, I did play that. So that was quite surprising for the senior artists. So I did Trikalam and all. Trikalam is basically splitting an RTP into three speeds, like
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
cutting it by fractions of two, then multiplying it by two. So I did that, and that was in a cycle of 9 beats, 18 beats. So that was something that my grandfather was very surprised about, and also some of the senior musicians that were present.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you remember that first concert of yours and how everybody was in awe around you?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So I still remember Sri T.K. Govindara, one of the celebrated musicians, musicologists. He was one of the chief guests, and I had presented a composition that he set to tune,
Mm-hmm.
Baro Krishnaya. Uh, So he was very, very happy listening to that. And yeah, I remember quite vividly.
Nice, nice. And of all these 1,600 plus concerts that you've done, and I know you've also played for the president, right? For the president of India.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, which one concert like stands out the most for you? I mean, it's going to be very hard, but you can say a
Yeah,
few.
but yeah, I think, certain concerts do like leave a lasting impression for the artists and also for the rasikas that listen to the concert. One such was, the first concert is always a special one.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was one at the Music Academy in 2018. So that was a very good concert, and also the fact that it was Music Academy, it's a big stage,
Yeah.
and there was a very good audience there, and the concert was really good, high energy concert. And also one at the Darbar Festival last year.
Mm-hmm.
It was at the Barbican Center.
Nice.
It was in London. So the Darbar Festival apparently is a huge festival, and so that was a great concert, a very very memorable concert, and it had people like Sudha Raghunathan ji, Buddhaditya Mukherjee ji, stalwarts of Indian classical music
Mm-hmm.
representing both North South. So they were present in the first row, and it was a wonderful concert. And also the fact, so after we finished the concert, we had the standing ovation for about 6, 7 minutes
Oh
nonstop.
wow. Oh wow.
So yeah, so I think some of the concerts, uh, definitely leave a lasting impression on, you know.
Hmm.
Uh, so I think I would say some of these concerts are very memorable.
Nice, nice. And do you also compose your own music?
I mean, in Indian classical music, every student is, kind of taught how to compose music. So we compose music on a daily basis. In the sense, um, we might not. So we are not Vagyakaras, wherein we also. I mean, not all of us. Some of them are, wherein we set a composition to tune and also, come up with the lyrics.
Hmm.
But the fact that we compose music on a daily basis, um, like when we do raga alap or when we do improvisations and swarams, we compose, we come up with something there at the spur of the moment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
uh, that happens on a daily basis. Some of the pallavis, the ragam tanam pallavis are our own composition. Some of them are traditional, some of them are taught to us by our gurus, some we get inspired by how someone else has sung, some other musicians have sung,
Mhm.
and we also compose our own pallavi. So uh, that's something that every Indian classical music student is taught to do from early on.
Yeah, yeah, nice. And who would you say are some of these inspirations for you in the music field?
A lot of them, and it keeps changing. So it's like this. So the moment your knowledge goes up, you know you tend to enjoy and get inspired by things that you probably didn't understand 15 years back.
Yeah.
So that keeps changing. I mean, musicians from the past, like, Flute Mali, he was my grandfather's guru. T.N. Rajratnam Pillai, Mandolin Srinivas,
Mm-hmm.
um, G.N. Balasubramaniam, Samangudi Srinivas Iyer, and from the current era, Sanjay Subramaniam sir, K.V. Narayanaswamy, Sudhaji, Bombay Jayashriji. So all of them, T.M. Krishnana, Vijay Shiva. So I listen to all of them, and I try to, you know, impart whatever I can from their music. And I also learn from Sri Sanjay Subramaniam, Sangeeta Kalanidhi Sanjay Subramaniam. So he's also my guru. Uh, so I think it's important we keep our eyes and ears open and try to assimilate as much of good music as possible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And as a kind of like a hardcore Carnatic music player, does being in this field actually influence what kind of music you listen to beyond Carnatic music, or do you like completely shy away from like, mainstream TV, like say Tamil movie music or Bollywood music, or are those things like you don't even bother with?
No, 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 it's not like that. So, firstly, I think there's nothing called hardcore Carnatic musician. I would say there are hardcore rasikas,
Mm-hmm.
who either listen to jazz only, or who either listen to cinema songs only, who either listen to Carnatic music only or Hindustani, or only say something more territorial, like Rabindra Sangeet in Kolkata. I don't think any musician is hardcore. And when you talk about, I mean, when anybody talks about Carnatic music in general, it is such a disciplined, uh, structured way of music that you learn it in a certain way wherein you can also broaden your horizon with different kinds of music. And my formative years were spent in the north of India.
See.
So I am exposed to Bollywood music. I'm exposed to Tamil cinema music. I listen to a lot of jazz. I listen to Western classical music, because in Western classical music you have composers that have composed numbers specific to certain instruments like violin, like flute.
Yeah.
So I also like listening to all that, and I listen to a lot of Hindustani classical music also,
Mm-hmm.
because um, I have done a lot of jugalbandis with Hindustani musicians from the north. So I listen to different forms of music, and Of course, I have also done fusion concerts wherein I have played cinema numbers. You ask me to play, um, a concert full of Ilayaraja sir's numbers, and I can do that for like 2 hours. A.R. Rahman sir's, I can do that for 2 hours. So I think it depends on how much uh, practice a musician has kind of undergone for him or her to be able to expand and come out of their comfort zone
Yeah.
to be able to do good music. That does not mean that, I major in Carnatic music. That does not mean that if I do Ilayaraja songs, if I present them on the flute, I'm less classical than what I'm supposed to be in Carnatic music. So that's a dogma that exists, with classical musicians. I
Yeah.
think,
That's
which I think classical musicians have come beyond now. It's beyond age. So those are certain things. When you expand your horizon, it's
yeah.
important that you retain your um, primary form of music, so that you
Mm.
don't eschew, or there is no less classicism involved
Yeah.
in what you do primarily. So certain things that you need to uh, have a good practice routine with, so that you do well with what your primary form of music is, and also you expand a bit here and there, which is absolutely fine. It helps your music anyways.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I think this kind of brings me along to the next thing I was going to ask you about, like, about how Carnatic music has evolved, how Carnatic musicians have evolved over the years, and how, like, now I think a lot more younger people are taking it up and trying this. But what have you seen in terms of in your journey? How has Carnatic music evolved in just in like your personal journey?
Okay, so I mean, when we talk about something like Carnatic music, I think 15 years is a very tiny period. It's a very, very cutie period.
For sure.
But it's important that a musician observes the changes and kind of m- adapts to it. So long as the changes are for good, it's good, because you don't really have to worry about what not to do, uh, or you can just continue doing what you're doing otherwise, right? So it's good that a lot of avenues have opened up for Carnatic music now, internationally, globally,
Yeah.
and a lot of our musicians end up performing at some world festivals. They represent Carnatic music, Indian classical music in general too. Um, and also the audiences have expanded. So in the past 15 years, I see in the last 5, 6 years specifically, there are so many youngsters that make it to concerts. And also when I had started off in early 2000s, 2003, 4, the scene for Carnatic instrumental music was shut. So whereas now in the past 10 years, 8 to 10 years, it has opened up. So it's more welcoming of newer faces,
Hmm.
I think, which is important for any art form to thrive.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
you can't expect an art form to thrive by closing the doors and not letting youngsters come up. So it's very important that youngsters make their way,
Mm-hmm.
and it's absolutely encouraging that there's so many youngsters that take up to listening to, like, flute concerts, or any other instrumental concert for that matter. And also, I think the concert attendance in general for Carnatic music has grown leaps and bounds in the past 10 years. I mean, we have superstars that have been drawing crowds like never before. So, all these are good signs. And also, in terms of music, I think with the advent of technology and all that we have around us, there's a lot more awareness. There's so much that you can compare
Mm-hmm.
with. So, the learning is much better. The process of learning is much better. So, you have an opportunity to dig out on the rare compositions, present them, with a fresh approach,
Yeah.
record stuff. So I think the change that has happened within Carnatic music in the past 15 years that I am aware of has been for good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And even like the advent of something like CarnaticON and all of these other platforms is to bridge that gap,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, between
Absolutely. And with things like these, like Carnatic on, I think it just reduces the gap between the musicians and students.
Yeah, yeah,
Also, in general, for the students to know about, it's not just about learning music. It's about, I can speak 6 languages, so I say this with a lot of confidence that knowing the words in a different language does not really help you communicate.
yeah,
You can only communicate well when you understand the expression behind the words, the sentence, or the statement.
yeah,
That's very important. Similarly, I think for a student to learn a certain form of music, it's important that the student is also exposed to that culture,
mm-hmm.
exposed to what happens behind just learning of music, who is the musician, and what has been his background in learning music.
Yeah.
So I think all of that is very important. So things have changed for good.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And like, how do you think that those aspects can be brought into like an online platform like this? Like, how do we? I mean, obviously through CarnaticON we have like bios of our instructors, we have videos of them performing and all of that, and you do end up building like a personal relationship when you start working with these teachers and all of that. But how do you bring this personal touch that you're talking about into a platform like CarnaticON?
I think by having more such interactive sessions, that's the only, I see it as the only way doing this virtually. So I think by having more interactive sessions, um, uh, by creating a certain portal wherein you can interact with multiple students at the same time, say with a moderator, so I think that helps.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that should be the way to do it.
Yeah, no, that's true. And like for a lot of people now, this has just become so much more accessible, right? Like just Carnatic music and having someone of like your caliber, all our other instructors who are based out of India, and for people like who are in the US, this is like something that we could have never dreamt of in the past to be able to learn
Absolutely.
from all of you amazing people. So I think it's a great opportunity to bridge that gap, just even between instructors in India and students here in the US. So we're super
Absolutely.
excited that you are on board and so many lucky people are going to learn from you. How did you get connected with CarnaticON?
So I watched one of my friends interview on CarnaticON,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the first kind of acquaintance with CarnaticON as such. And then it was Mr. Jay Raghu who contacted me,
Yeah.
and then he wanted me to be a part of CarnaticON, and henceforth I got in touch with Archana, and then Archana explained what CarnaticON is, and I was very happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, we are super excited. Have you taught before on in this kind of like an online format?
Yeah,
You have, right? Like
yeah.
everybody's been teaching online. And what are your like thoughts on the plus and minus of online versus in-person teaching?
Well, I would say, you know, in the present circumstances, online teaching is a must because not all of us can make it to either sides of the world, you know, um, on a daily basis or as often as we would want it to be. So I'm sure online classes, it enables us to have this conversation quite freely without any technical glitch. So with things like this, I'm sure it does help a student to pick the nuances to a certain extent. I wouldn't say it's 100% always. There's nothing replacing a one-on-one class, with a guru. But online classes do help. It definitely is a possibility, and it has worked for so many people in the past so many years. So online classes are very good, but it's also important that the student or the parent or even the guru for that matter makes it a point that at least once a year, if you know they could have one-on-one classes, the doubts are cleared in a jiffy because
Yeah.
uh, while teaching two, three people at a time virtually, the chances that a sentence is misinterpreted in three different ways,
Mm-hmm.
because every student has a way in which they perceive
Yeah,
what
yeah.
is given to them.
Mm-hmm.
So their understanding need not be the same of uh, the content that is said. So I think it requires a lot of patience from both ends,
Yeah.
and virtual is very good, but also I think having one-on-one classes every now and then, or at least once in a year for people that are abroad,
Yeah.
it definitely helps.
Yeah, yeah, that's very valuable advice. I think I will make a appointment with my teacher in Chennai also and meet her once a year and go do
For
some
sure.
in-person class with
This
her.
also gives you an excuse to come to India, so or to Chennai. So you should.
No, that's true. That's true. I mean, like with COVID, I think it was only natural that all of this would get adapted into like a virtual world, and now I'm sure the whole you're also doing a lot of these Zoom concerts. And how has that experience been, like doing a concert virtually?
Well, it's been very different because to perform without an audience is not that easy, and you don't really realize it until and unless you do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there have been a lot of concerts, of this nature, like recorded content happening since June.
Yeah.
And I recorded about eight, nine concerts, or maybe more than that. I'm not sure, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe lesser. Um Initially, it seemed a bit incomplete, but that became the new normal. So um, I think an artist needs to embrace the changes, right? So he or she is left with no option. So the faster one embraces the change, the better it is for him or her.
Yeah, no, but I personally can't wait for all of this to be over, a vaccine or whatever, but to get back to like a normal concert because I think nothing will replace that experience, even for
Absolutely.
someone like me who listens, right? Like it's just listening. I mean, obviously, listening to you play that bass, the first bass that you played was like it felt so
Yeah,
soulful, and you played so little of it, and I was already like, oh my God, if only I could like hear this in person, right? So I can't wait for us to all go back to watching live live concerts again.
absolutely.
What would you say is like your favorite flute piece, and can you please play that for us?
Sure. Yamini, can we pause it here?
Sure, sure. One
Just a
second.
second.
Let me.
My phone. That was a bit of Jagadodharana.
Yeah, I thought I recognized that somewhere in the middle. That's awesome. So nice. I just feel like listening to some more. One, can you play something else for us a little bit more before I let you go, please?
Sure. Um, to play a bit of raga Bhupali.
Mm-hmm.
So Bhupali is the equivalent of Carnatic Mohanam.
I see. Thank you so much. We
My
are
pleasure.
super stoked to have you on CarnaticON. I can't wait for students to start learning from you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us today. And we're looking forward to a
Thank you so
long
much for
partnership.
having me on board. Such a pleasure.
Of course, no, it's our pleasure. So thank you so much, Jayant. You have a great rest of your day. And for everybody else watching, we hope you've enjoyed this session. We'll see you again next week with another artist. For now, it's bye bye from Jayant and me. Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye, Jayant. Have a good one.